So, Ethan, I want to thank you for taking the time this Sunday morning to actually do this interview. I know we usually shoot the whatnot when it's like midnight. So, honestly, this is kind of a nice change of pace.
I was kind of surprised when you were like 7 o'clock. I was like, what? Is he going to be dancing till like 2 a.m.?
That's right, folks. Today I'm going to be talking with a guy that is just starting out in New England's indie film scene and is starting to build a name for himself with his directorial debut. That film is Rockets in Space, Rescue Above Neptune, and the director's name is Ethan Aho. Back in July of 2020, I was on set to capture sound for his debut film. Ethan is a pretty cool dude, and after seeing the end result of his film myself at the premiere back in March of this year, he has proven himself to be really solid in his craft. He actually let me put a clip from his film on my website as a sample of my skills as a production sound mixer, even though his film isn't available for streaming yet. So if you want to see that clip for yourself, I'll be including a link to my production sound mixer page in the description along with the link to the Rockets in Space website. However, here is a small sample of said clip.
How would I leave you floating in space without a helmet? All right, you help us save him, and I'll do it because I'm crazy.
Okay, enough stalling. Let's go ahead and pick Ethan's brain about how Rockets in Space, Rescue Above Neptune came to be. Okay. So I know this entire video is more directed towards having you talk about your experiences with making rockets in space and your plans for that in the future. But before we actually get there, what inspired you to want to pursue a career in film in the first place?
Well, I've heard this question asked a lot for a lot of filmmakers, and usually they talk about how they were making films as a kid with their parents' VCR recorder, and that wasn't me. I was watching one of the Sci-fi Friday features on the Sci-fi channel, and I got angry at it. It was like vampires in space, and they had. And I was an adult, right? And they had the cliche, small group of actors that go to every planet, and every planet looks like Canada. And I was okay with that. And they had the sexy vampire character, but it was the ships, it was the spaceships that bugged me, right? So they had this horrible CGI spaceship, and then I was like, why did they just glue paper plates together and paint it? It would have been better. But then they got to a space battle because the vampires had their own spaceships. I'm like, this is why. So
Because of course.
Ray guns or something, right? But it wasn't that. Every time they're firing on us, it would cut to the bridge and everyone would just shake around. And then it would cut to the outside of the ships and they'd just be there. And I was so angry at the model effects of the film that I started talking with this guy that I knew that was into filmmaking. I'm like, hey, if I were to just make a model and send it to a place, could I get that model into a film? And he's like, well, you could send it and you'd never get it back. They might blow it up. I'm like, okay. But then when I learned, I was like, how do I make a model? And then it was like, well, you need to understand the script. I'm like, okay, well, and then I started researching how scripts work. And then it was just a rabbit hole from there. And I'm like, oh, I want to make this script and I want to make this rocket ship to go with this, And it was just, that was my rabbit hole, was just being angry, yelling at the TV as an adult.
Okay, I gotta admit, that's kind of a interesting source of inspiration. I mean, obviously you mainly hear about people wanting to be oh, I played around with VHS cameras when I was a kid, or in my case, it was hey, I found it interesting, but my mother decided to try to put pressure on me to actually be a chef. Then I rediscovered my passion for film in high school. Yeah, I'm trying to think if this was something I brought up with my therapist. But anyway, but the
I always
fact,
like consuming film. I always loved Star Wars, Star Trek, all these sci-fi things, the old Outer Limits type stuff. I loved all
but
that.
in your case, you literally saw a made-for-TV film, and you were like, if this guy can do it, if this guy can do it. Am I understanding this correctly?
I mean, it was more around just like the model making got me into it. So the idea of making a model, which I mean, I made lots of models of Star Wars and Star Trek ships as a kid, and so making a model for a movie was my gateway drug into the filmmaking world. And since then, of course, I've written a script, made the models. Yeah, so we've got a model right
Mm-hmm.
behind me, and got to make props and costumes and ray guns. It was, that's a lot of fun, and so now I'm hooked.
Okay, so you mentioned like going down a rabbit hole when it came to actually learning how to actually like do actual film stuff beyond making models. May I ask what different resources did you look into? Did you buy online courses? Go searching up YouTube channels with people actually talking and teaching the filmmaking process, that kind of thing.
So what I did is I wanted to make progress as a filmmaker, and I felt making progress was learning. And so I listened to podcasts, I watched a lot of YouTube channels, read blogs. I never really paid for the courses of anything. I just followed what was free and out there.
Mm-hmm.
I bought a DSLR camera and I went and practiced with that. I did a couple like 1 minute film contests that kind of challenged me to produce something.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I even at one point I was so far into like the technical things, and I come from a very technical day job. I was very much in the technical, the camera and the audio, and you know, pulled my head out of that and go, well, what about the human element? And so I went and I joined a local theater production as one of the people helping behind the scenes. So I got to see the auditions, all everything from the casting all the way up to the final shows. I'm over there like turn lights on, turn lights off, play the sound type stuff. Um, and I got to see these actors come together and make something, and that was a very human side of things that I needed to delve into. But at some point, the blogs, the podcasts, the YouTube videos, they became very repetitive. And I realized I wasn't actually learning anything new, that the only way to learn more was to do something. And that was the motivation to be like, all right, I need to finish this script, and this is the year I'm going to actually make my film.
Hey, I totally get it. I mean, in my case, I finally got around to learning the Fusion tab in DaVinci Resolve, and I was like, okay, last year I was intimidated by this, but 2 weeks ago, not so much. But obviously I keep throwing out my examples like I'm some kind of narcissist. I'm sorry about that.
My first sci-fi was a 1 minute sci-fi. It was like a 1 minute film challenge. And like I want to make sci-fi, and I made a whole cockpit in my living room, and I had two people come over to be the actors, and I made little models for it because I wanted to try that. And I think for that 1 minute film, I spent at least 80 hours,
Damn.
and I learned so much. And then I was like, oh, I'm ready for my longer, form sci-fi film. But I was not. So I learned more on the last one too.
Okay, so I guess first the big question is for those who might not be familiar with for Rescue Above Neptune, which is the subtitle for Rockets to Space, duh. Could you give a rundown of what the film is about and what were the direct and indirect inspirations behind it?
The film, when I write sci-fi, I always like to have that. I love The Outer Limits because when I watched that sci-fi, when the episode ended, my brain was still engaged. I was still thinking of, oh, that's a cool concept, and you can think like well, what would happen, and follow it through in your head. And I always love the sci-fi that just plants a seed in your head and then ends, and you keep thinking about it a while later. So I wanted to keep that going with my sci-fi. And I was trying to figure out, what sort of sci-fi I can make. And one of the inspirations, you see watch Airplane, right? Almost everything takes place on the side of the airplane. But there's even a great Doctor Who episode where, they're seeing the crystal formations and the like diamond waterfalls, and there's a monster outside the ship that you never even see. And I always love that. Never even see the monster. Although I did actually in Rockets in Space show the monster hanging from screen.
I remember I was there.
So, so seeing that Doctor Who episodes, honestly, the airplane episodes, all those stuff sort of helped come together. But as someone that got into filmmaking as a ship maker, modeler, or prop maker, a lot of what went into the film and some of the dialogue really came from what props I had and what set pieces I knew I could build. I was walking through a grocery or through a store, and I see this composter. I'm like, that could be an engine core, and suddenly the engine core was there. I was at a flea market and I saw this certain game, which is in Rockets in Space, and the moment I saw that, I just had that inspiration of what the entire beginning of Rockets in Space is, just from seeing that. And I still haggled the flea market seller down on that one. But I got that game, and that became part of the start of Rockets in Space. The idea comes to me from a lot of the props.
Okay. So I guess next question would be kind of what was the pre-production process was kind of like, because I know I was there for production. We ended up talking a lot as you were going through post, but kind of what was the pre-production process for you?
Pre-production was, letting other people read my script. And, well, my mom read the script and was like, oh, this is amazing. I was like, okay. I I managed to track down a friend. He's like, oh, my wife is this, a writer. I'm like, cool. So I reached out, and turns out she's a sci-fi writer, and like, um, she's a judge for writing contests. And so I talked with her, and she read my script, and we talked for an hour, and it was an amazing hour where she started off by saying, just so you know, I love your script, and now I'm going to tear it to pieces. And she did just that. And so with her feedback and my wife's feedback, I was able to polish the script up to the point where I was like, this is good. And it included even removal of entire character. And so once I had it down to that, then it was, well, what can I build? And it went back to working on the theater production. Okay, well, I can make flats, and this is how big it would be. And then what props would I have? What costumes would I have? And I had a first version of the script 6 years prior. And so anything I had seen at Goodwill or at a flea market or yard sale, I had collected knowing what the script entailed. So I had a lot of little pieces floating around. But about 2 weeks before the film was actually going to be produced, the chairs we used, some of the center console.
Sorry, that was my phone. Continue.
Some of the center console, all those things. It was dumpster diving. People were just there were some people moving from my apartment complex, and there was so much stuff being put next to the dumpsters. I was like, these are the chairs we're going to use, and this is what I'm building my console around. I knew I wanted old gauges and stuff, and a friend of mine's like, oh, I've got an old pickup truck in my yard. We can take off the dash and use that. So I have an 1850s Ford, dashboard to start with. So just tons and tons of prop making. The ray gun, the primary ray gun of the film, I went to a friend with and asked them to produce it because I wanted it to be unique and something that wasn't just my normal hot glued mess, and that worked out really well to have something different, and it was supposed to be different. So it was pre-production was a lot because it was sci-fi. There's a giant spreadsheet of all the costumes, all the stuff that hangs on the walls, all the set pieces, building the flats, tracking down someone to help me build the flats. I live in an apartment complex, so like I'm not just gonna suddenly be able to set up a bunch of tools and do that.
I mean, you
Um,
could, but I'm sure your landlord would be like, Ethan, what are you doing?
I went off behind our storage units in this like grass area that really no one goes in, and that's where I set up all the flats to paint. So we did paint the flats there, and I even posted a sign in the grass of like with my cell phone number and like if you're confused, please call this. This is dry. Um, so yeah, there was some challenges with that, and having a minivan is great, but we still rented a U-Haul to get everything there. And I would say that's the big challenge of sci-fi. It's just the sheer amount of checklists for props, costumes, set pieces, all that stuff, and then um, planning this out. And I did sit down with two other filmmakers, KJ and Mitch, ahead of time, and I showed them my production plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I went over, what do you think of this? And I got some really good feedback from both of them that helped me sort of solidify the plans leading into production. And then shortly before production happened, my location rental fell through.
Mm-hmm.
And, I called up another filmmaker, and it was Terry Trainer. And he's like, oh, you should call up Dan at the Strand in Dover, New Hampshire, and talk with him. And I did, and that was the best thing that could have happened. I'm glad my previous location fell through because the Strand was just amazing to use. But, hey, we're at the Strand. That's very far from where we were starting at. And that led to like, well, I guess I need to get some hotel rooms for the actors and crew. It meant that I didn't even know what restaurants were in the area, and I couldn't just cook at my home and bring it, to set.
I mean, you
And
could
so,
have. Crockpot.
mm,
I mean, crockpots are a thing.
yeah, there's a bit of a drive, and yeah. So I didn't have access to, my wife being able to cook at home and me being able to go pick it up or her be able to drop it off. And so
Okay, good
the
point.
the cost of food from the initial plan went up. The hotel costs went up. Everything just kind of went up and up and up and up. But at that point, it's like, all right, we're gonna throw money at this, and by that I mean like swipe a credit card and hope. And we production started.
Okay, so you mentioned Kalani Trainer and Mitch Fortier, who
Mhm.
are two and KJ's brother Terry, who are all people I have worked with in the past. In fact, I think all except for one cast member I actually have collaborated with up before production.
Mhm.
So I guess the big question is, and first is, how did you go about finding said cast, and if and was it just simply coincidence that I knew most of the members when it came time to shoot?
Um, it wasn't just coincidence. So when I started down this filmmaking path, I said I started with theater production as understanding, helping me understand the human elements of working as a team to create an art piece. And when I was there, I was very upfront. I'm like, hey, I want to become a filmmaker. And people in the area were like, oh, you should talk with Mitch Fortier. Okay. And so I talked with Mitch. And talking with Mitch also ended up with I ended up on the early late night live show with Terry Trainer, KJ, and Mitch as the host. And so I met them all there. I got to see some of KJ and Terry's work. And I knew my film had a certain female character in it that I figured KJ would love to play, being such the sci-fi nerd that she is. Um, and so I was like, all right, well, KJ has made feature film. Mitch is very familiar with filmmaking, and I want them both to be actors in my film. Because when I first was looking like, hey, I want to be a filmmaker, who's the first person I ever talked to? It was Mitch. And so he was very helpful, helping me, start my career off. I was like, right, when I make a film, I'm gonna call you up. And so those two were known. There wasn't like an audition. It was just sort of like, here's the script. Which characters would you like to play? And then I sat down with them individually and went over, here's my production plan. And as people that had been on sets before, and I had never been on anyone's set before, they were able to give me feedback on my plans, my production plan. And then from there, put out sort of a casting call. But everyone that I cast, I would reach out to, people that I've already cast and say, hey, have you worked with this person before? Would you like to work with them again? Because I didn't want to end up with any conflicts on set with personalities. And so it was one of those things that everyone that I cast, I either was vetted through someone I already knew and had some trust in, or I ended up actually calling up Justin Fortin up in Maine and talking with him about one of the actors. So yeah, the cast and crew kind of came together, not so much through referrals. I think maybe some of the actors found out through the other actors that had already been cast. But that's sort of how I ended up with a collection of people that you've already worked with or met in the past. I didn't just, there's no one that arrived on set that I hadn't sort of vetted in some way.
Yeah, because I gotta admit, when I ended up seeing Kate Epps, Chris Salvi, and Bob Turge, I was like, wait a minute. Okay, so.
And that's also, your name came up because I'm like, I need an audio person, and your name came up for that. So I had met you prior to that, so I was already like wanting to call you up. And then when the cast was also like, you should call Ryan, I was like, all right. So yes, they knew you, I knew you, and that worked out.
Right. So kind of getting back to the finally getting to the actual production stuff. So anyone that's seen the trailer for Rockets in Space, clearly it's graded in black and white, and I have seen some productions where they do black and white, but it definitely looks like an afterthought. To me, that's not the case with Rockets in Space. So, kind of, what were some of the things you did so that way when you got into post and you converted it to black and white, it actually looked solid?
So I would, when I was working with props, costumes, testing, I'd often just go to Instagram and take a picture of it and add a black and white filter just to kind of see how that showed up, even though I knew that would be the final black and white. The biggest one that is noticeable in the behind the scenes pictures, if you go to like rocketsandspace.com and you see the behind the scenes, is the neon pink walls that I made. And that just came from researching black and white, where you find out that like the original Addams family, shot black and white. Well, they had pink wall. That to find out that like you never are supposed to have white fabric in a film production. If it is, you should dye it in tea or something. And even when I needed some fake blood for the set, and you're researching fake blood and all the different recipes for it and things that can be in the mouth, things that can be on the skin, and then I find out that the movie Psycho from Alfred Hitchcock just used chocolate syrup because it was black and white and that was dark. And I'm like, really? It's just chocolate syrup going down that shower drain. So that's sort of like, well, and one of the reasons I went with black and white was just from the standpoint of it helped production cost, because I didn't have to make sure everything was perfectly intertwined with each other. I could fix things after fact. And the original costumes I picked out were yellow. Looked great in black and white. They were yellow. And it wasn't until about a week before production, or maybe it was a little bit earlier, where I realized that those wouldn't work. They were too noisy. They were like hazmat suits. And they looked great in all the photo testing that I did a quick video test. and they were so noisy every time you moved, and I hear it in the microphone. I'm like, oh, that won't work. And so I ordered costumes, and the new like coveralls that we used only arrived about the day before filming, before I left for filming.
Yeah, my eyes are just kind of widening at that because I have been on productions where it just the stories I could tell you, but I'm pretty sure I've told you most of them by now. Okay, so I guess next one to ask is what I know you did a video on Jay Horn's YouTube channel about how you ended up dropping your lens that you were using, and how basically your dad had to travel to a different state to find another one because you didn't want to use my A6400, in which I don't blame you. Rolling shutter on that thing is terrible. In hindsight, it was probably a good thing I had to pawn it off. Anyway, so I guess I should ask, were there any other like crazy things that happened on set that you are actually willing to talk about?
So the two from like for other filmmakers to hear things that happen on set that were crazy is on the first day, there was it was 7-day production, but 3 days of actually filming actors. And the first day, I set it so that we would start with one actor and all her scenes, and then the two more actors arrive, and we have three actors, we get their scenes. The next day, we'd start off with three actors, then get up to the sixth, and then we'd be rolling with the sixth from there. And that was my idea to like kind of ramp up and get familiar with everything. And so, first day of filming, one actress. We're filming out about halfway through the day. My camera says low battery. Oh yeah, that's fine. Let's get one more B-roll right here. And as I was moving, the camera, Blackmagic 4K, Pocket 4K, the battery died. And it's like, oh, all right, well, put another battery in. It says, you need to format the hard drive. And I'm like, no, I don't. And so I go over to the computer, plug in I'd say, take 5, I go to the computer and I connect the hard drive. It says, unformatted hard drive. Would you like to format? No. And so at that point, I called you over, Ryan, and I pointed at the screen, and your eyes went big. I'm like, I just need a hug, and you gave me a hug, and I didn't tell anyone because I was like, all right, this is probably solvable. I set that hard drive aside, put the new hard drive in, continued filming that day. And that night, I bought, data recovery software, could not find the data. And I was like, oh, that's not good. So the next day I had to talk with the actors, like, that hard drive is correct. I'm still working on it. So then the second night, I did end up like on tech support with this company. I paid them extra, and they went through, they found the begin file, end file, like hex codes on the hard drive, and we're manually searching for those within all the sectors, and then copying those sectors from start to end to my other hard drive, and tagging with a file name that they made up. But I had to go to sleep, and they had full access to my computer. They were just working on my computer, and then I passed out, and I woke up, and then that morning of the last film day, I found out that the hard drive had been restored, so I didn't lose any files. We didn't have to like make up those shots, but I lost so much sleep on a production that I didn't have much time to sleep on my schedule.
Let this be a lesson to everybody. When your battery's in the red, never go one more shot, especially when you're working with a Blackmagic cinema camera, because the thing is the pocket line, and I'm sure you're definitely you're well aware of this by now. The battery life in any of the pocket cameras is so bad that essentially using like a V-mount battery is like your only option to have it last for quite a while. And by quite a while, I mean more than like half an hour.
The other thing is the way I format the hard drives, because I'm a Windows user, is different than a Mac would format the Blackmagic camera. And the Mac formatting probably wouldn't have had the same issue. It's just a different way of handling file format. So that was also one of those, like, in hindsight. But then, yes, on the second day of production, I had a little panicky, oh my gosh, and I started moving too quickly and put my camera on a tripod, moved the tripod. Turns out my camera wasn't really connected to the tripod. It just went, boom. And man, did the room go quiet. I didn't have to call silence on set. Everyone went quiet. And I pick it up and someone asked, is it okay? And I turned it on. I'm like, no. And I had broken the lens. That was a bad time there. So it's like, all right, what are the options? And you, Ryan, you're like, all right, I've got a camera in my car. I'm gonna go. Or you had on and set in a box. You're like, all right, so you start setting up your camera as an option. And Dan from the Strand is calling up other filmmakers he knows, and Mitch is over there. He's very familiar with some certain hardware, so he's looking at, like, well, can this be fixed on set? And the answer is like no, but he got everything packaged up, so I had all the pieces in one bag. And my dad was the savior in that day where he came up. He's a photographer, and so he knows a lot of the shops in the area. And so he's like, all right, I can get you the exact same lens. If I leave right now, I can be back by 8 p.m. tonight. And so, that was like the option I was going to go with. I'm like, because the color, I didn't want to mess with two different types of camera, color science and mixing them together in post. I'm just not that good. And so I'm like, yes, you go do that. And we packaged up the camera and everything, sent him along. And then I sort of pointed at certain people. I'm like, you stay. And I pointed at people that I knew they have made film productions before. And everyone, I'm like, everyone else just show up at 8 a.m. We'll be ready to roll. And so the people that stayed, we sat around a table, and Mitch Fortier gave me a crash course in, how to break down, shot list for film. But as a group, there was a lot of ideas of how to film what remained in one day. And from that, I stayed up late that night, creating this new sort of list of shots that need to happen the next day. Woke up at 6 a.m., and I did not sit down until midnight, and we wrapped right at midnight. Some actors left before then, but the final shots at midnight wrap, and that was a very long day.
Yeah, I remember that weekend all too well. Because as soon as I got home the next day, I went to go work on a film that Chris Salvi was directing, and only after that I realized that my cat has disappeared, and I have not seen her since.
Oh,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
It's been a couple of years, and I still miss her, but I've come to terms that she's gone. Yeah.
My cat is currently getting in trouble on my dining table in front of me.
Hey, little fella. Hey, buddy.
And this cat and I are going to star in my next Rockets in Space film. I wanted to make a film with my cat. And so
I've been writing. Yeah, for the thumbnail of this video, I'm including a section from this where it's like, yep, the cat's in the photo. Anyway, that's the next part I actually wanted to talk about has to do with the post-production process. So I guess the first question is, what was the workflow for actually doing post for the film itself? What was the workflow like? So
what I found very interesting is, I am the writer, director, cinematographer for this film. And what I wrote on the page isn't exactly what I captured on the camera, because, things changed on set and had to make adjustments. I'm like, okay, that's fine, it's fine. And then when I get to editing what I had filmed, I was like, oh, I can't use that. And so I had to come up with new solutions with the footage I had. And that came back to my inexperience as an editor. I had done some stabilization in the past, right? Mm-hmm. You hit the stabilize button, it magically does everything. You're like, aha. It does not work when you're hand holding the camera doing movement shots.
No, yeah, there's a lot of situations where just putting on image stabilization just does not work.
So this was my lesson in that. And so with that not working out, I had to do some other things, which ended up working out nicely in the edit. But my workflow was, you know, make lots of backups, send one hard drive of backups over to like my parents' house. So if my place burned down, I would be okay. It's like, I don't want to lose the shots. Don't want to lose the shots. And I use DaVinci Resolve for the entire workflow. I have a Blackmagic 4K camera. We have the audio. Linking those things together is pretty much an automagic button. And
to an extent, I mean, I tried it for thinking scenes I shot for a music video, and maybe it's just because we didn't have a Bluetooth speaker, so the song itself came in too quiet, so I had to sync that thing manually. That was yeah.
I just found that it was a little too aggressive, and so some shots would have 18 audio files linked to it when there should have been 2. And so I would have to isolate and figure out which ones to delete, and then, it would be fine. But that part wasn't the time-consuming piece. There was a green screen on set for the front monitor of the rocket ship. There was a porthole off to the side on most shots. And so, working with that porthole to add the things, whether there's a star field or the monster outside, that took a lot. And then the green screen up at the front and working with that. And then finding out that certain green screening techniques worked really well, and some would take 2 hours to export a 30-second clip. And so it was just it was quite a learning of all these different sort of effects that I need to do for sci-fi, and how they overwhelmed my computer. I did have to buy a new computer with a better graphics card, more RAM, because, well, I had this gaming laptop, and it worked fine in the beginning. The more I started to modify the visuals, the more that it just struggled to even play back on the screen.
And so I just wanted to say for those who want a time frame of when he actually got his new editing system, this was around the time that basically the price for all the graphics cards, not just like the Nvidia's new 30 series cards, they were being scalped and price gouged to the point where every time I just looked on eBay for like a used previous gen, I would start crying. It was so bad. Sorry, go on.
I am still on a payment plan to pay off my new computer. As we're talking right now, I still have like a good chunk of the payment plan left. But my solution was to go to Newegg, where they have this ABS brand, where it's basically their people putting together towers. And that's how they really sold the graphics card. Like, oh, you want a graphics card? How about this computer around it? I'm like, oh, that's what I need. And so I did end up with a nice, computer with like 80 gig of RAM with RTX 3070. So I ended up with a computer that could handle the sci-fi that I was producing and almost play it back in real time in most situations. So suddenly the editing got a lot better. And there were certain things where it's just like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to see on the screen. I didn't even know that was a thing before. So it was really nice having that computer. It helped me, finish it. But even with that, it was a challenge. I could not export my film as one. It would always fail. So the Premiere and what was on the Premiere DVD, I had to export that in chunks. And I would export it in a few minute intervals. I was keeping track of it on paper, and then I had to then merge all those pieces together into a final one, do a big export of that. But yeah, even with the new powerful computer, exporting the full video just wasn't an option for me.
Well, at the very least, with Resolve Studio, it can actually utilize multiple GPUs. So if you ever decide to upgrade your editing rig, all you need to do is first make sure the motherboard has a second PCIe 16X slot, and then buy another graphics card.
And pay off the current one. That's really the goal right now.
And also make sure your power supply can handle the second get GPU. And if it can't, you might also want to invest
My
it.
motherboard and tower could not handle a second one, but I am very happy with the rig I have for now. I feel that it gives me just enough that I can do some of the sci-fi stuff that I want to do. I can produce them. I can also start getting into Blender and Unreal Engine and start teaching myself those tools.
Okay, so backing up a little bit to when you mentioned how you approached the exporting for the premiere, did you want to talk a bit about how you got that set up? Kind of some of the behind the scenes for getting it ready and how you felt it went.
Um, it went in a panicky mode. There's a lot of emotions that go into the filmmaking. When I was in pre-production, it was like, oh, I hope people like this, right? And that's easy enough to sort of like, but during production, what if an actor doesn't show? I have no alternates. I don't know enough people to just call up someone, and so, here I am. I've already rented the hotel rooms. I've rented the location, and it's like, well, let's hope everyone shows up, and they did. So that, and even the first day of filming went on, and then the second day happened. That's when all the actors showed up, and so even after the first day of filming, I still have that mini panic of, oh, is everyone show up? Now, when it came to the premiere, I had to pick a date in advance, and so I was like, oh, okay, well, I know I need the time to fix it all up, and I'm going to add extra time because, of course, it's going to take longer than I thought. But between work and Cub Scouts and getting my Cub Scout den crossed over into Scouts BSA, that took up a lot of time, more than I expected. And then when it came time to finish up the film, nothing was going according to plan. And so I didn't actually have a version. I had 0 versions of the film in a file. It's not like even there's like a rough draft I could bring to the premiere. I had no versions of the film exported fully until 3:30 a.m. the day of the premiere.
Wow.
And so it was just one of those of like, okay, when I finally had that, it was like, okay, let's make copies of this file. And then I was like, let me put it up on, I put on a private link on YouTube and I go over to my TV and I have to watch it like right in the morning just to make sure like, okay, is it okay? And I could see a few things wrong with it, but I was like, I don't have time to export it again. And that's livable for now. So it's like, all right. So that was the version of the premiere, but that was terrifying. It was just absolutely terrifying knowing that my premiere was the next day and I didn't have a film and staying up till 3:30 a.m. and just like, oh, finally it exports. I'm like, yes, yes. And then I get some sleep, not much, have to wake up, and then I have to finish the rest of the premiere, all the, some of the behind the scenes, the blooper reels, those sort of things for the premiere. That was a busy day.
Yeah, I can I can definitely imagine. And this is gonna sound weird, but I have to thank you it because pretty much standing in the back of the theater and me not being able to see a damn thing, I was like, "Yep, I'm definitely gotta go get glasses. I'm more likely than not nearsighted." So I know that sounds weird, but I did confirm with Kate Up yes, everything was in focus. Okay, so thank you for that. So I guess kind of big question is, the film is premiered, and so what are your kind of plans with it moving forward?
Well, I have to finish it. So, like I said, there's a couple things I noticed with it that I need to correct, some special effects, and what I'm going to be doing because my film is an odd length. Right now, it sits at just over 38 minutes. Well, there's a lot of streaming services out there that view 40 minutes as this magical number of like, another thing under there is they just call it short, and they don't necessarily want to call a 40-minute a feature, but they don't call it a short. So my next goal is I need to merge in the blooper reel with the credits and make that a nice 40-minute film. I need to fix up a couple of the special effects. And at that point, I can do a new master export, and I will be creating a final DVD that is sort of right now there's the premiere in a box DVD, which I only made 25 of. But I will be making a more final DVD, which I want to do like a director's commentary on. That I will have that DVD up on my site. It'll download up on the site, but then I'll be uploading the film to Film Hub, where who knows where it'll land, but it should land someplace where people go on their Roku, be able to watch the film. And so there's going to be a large marketing campaign that I need to finalize. I have like a spreadsheet of all these ideas, and I need to start implementing them, whether they're graphics or video snippets, and start trying to tell the world, hey, come check out these amazing actors and what they did, in front of the camera.
Okay, so you mentioned you had different ideas about how you were going to market the film. Did you want to go into any detail about them, or would you rather save them as a surprise?
Well, I mean, it's I've worked next to designers and marketers for the last, I don't know, 20 years. So I have that foot in the marketing world, and I have that and also I just sci-fi people are kind of like my people. I'm a member of a lot of groups even before I became a filmmaker, and so I kind of know what those groups like to see. But yeah, it's literally a spreadsheet of like 90 different ideas or more of either graphics or video snippets that I could do, or small behind the scenes that I can use behind the scenes photographs with and my own little video. So there's just all this stuff to put out there because a lot of people like to see how films are made, not to the point that a filmmaker does. A filmmaker wants to delve into a lot, but just that sort of peek under the covers for a fan, it can be really fun. And I know that because I'm a big Star Wars fan, and there's a lot of behind the scenes things that go on with Star Wars that I've always loved, and Star Trek. And so it's just kind of getting those things out there and building up that audience. I think one thing that I'm going to be doing that is a little bit more unique is I am setting up an in-world newspaper website that will have different editions, and those will sort of be like the news, like a newspaper in between the different rockets and space movies I'm planning on making. You'll see little stories, little snippets, and kind of leading into the next film, or fallout from the last film. And I enjoy writing, and I think I'm going to enjoy writing this in-world newspaper from Mars.
All right, so you mentioned you're going to be doing additional rockets and space films, which kind of makes sense, especially with the subtitle for this first one. Well, actually having a subtitle. So I'm assuming based on that a lot of it can easily be more anthology-esque, and obviously some direct sequels, like you mentioned the fallout of the events of Rescue from Neptune. So I guess out of curiosity, is it your next number of projects? Is it strictly going to be films related to rockets and space, or do you have ideas for films that aren't related to that whatsoever that you're interested in doing?
I have more film ideas than I can finish in my lifetime. But what I'm actually going to be focusing on for now is I know I'm focusing on rockets in space. There's actually a couple that I want to be learning right now. I'm wanting to teach myself Blender and Unreal Engine. I would like to be able to make models like this, but scan them into a 3D model and be able to add them into a space scene in Unreal Engine to get the shadows and the asteroids and stuff that I want to do. So I want to get into sort of better graphics for my retro sci-fi, but not ever up to date. So I'm working on rockets in space. I'm going to continue working on rockets in space films, but there are a couple films that have nothing to do with rockets in space that I would like to sort of be involved with in the coming years. But the priority for me is going to be making sure I can continue to grow the rockets in space. It's one world in my head,
Mm-hmm.
and well, there will be some overlap in maybe some characters or names, but each story is very different. The next one, I want to have my cat and I, for example. And well, I should not be in front of the screen. My cat works with me and plays with me very differently than anyone else. So I have to be there. And then there's a rocket space outline that I have that will involve a retired couple and a robot. So the idea is I always love the outer limits sort of thing where each, you got to, there's a theme through it, but each one was its own story. And mine's sort of the cross with that, where it all takes place inside the same sort of solar system, but it's just stories within that solar system.
Okay, I guess I only got a couple more questions. Although I guess one more question, really, because I know in between shooting rockets in space and getting it premiere, you ended up helping out with a few other productions, and one of them I was there on. On one of them, you told me stories about. So, I guess and you were kind of, for both of those, you were like the camera operator and whatnot. Do you feel like for future projects you would continue on kind of that cinematographer-esque route, or do you really feel like that's not really you?
I am not a cinematographer. I actually had someone that was on one of the other productions. He reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you mind being the cinematographer on some future project he's working on?" And I was like, "Well, let's stop right there. I'm not a cinematographer. I'm just a dude that happens to own a camera, and those are two very different things." So for Rockets in Space, I figured out a workflow that worked for me on set. But as you said earlier, if you have a Blackmagic 4K and you're using the default batteries for it, what are you doing? And well, I'm one of those people. I'm using the default batteries for it. So every Rockets in Space film, I can leave my camera plugged into the wall outlet. And so, but if you're a cinematographer, you need to be able to, go outside without an extension cord that goes 400 feet, which I know you were on that set.
Yeah, and to this day, I just think about that, and I'm like, one of these days, I'm just gonna show up to your place with like a gold mount battery, a plate, and a cable connected to your pocket 4K, and probably be like, even if you don't use this, I'm abducting your cat.
So, for those that aren't aware, Ryan actually helped with the green screen videos of the Rockets in Space when we brought set up the green screen and put these models in front of them and got the shots we needed. And that was also another day where here's my camera rig all on the tripod, and then I'm just like gaff taping the cable that goes off to the plug. So my camera is generally wall mounted with power. And for what I'm doing with Rockets in Space, that's fine. I don't have any Rockets in Space footage or scenes that require me to, have to be on a battery. And so I haven't wanted to invest the money in that. But no, when it comes to other people's film sets, generally I'm helping because one, I'm either wanting to learn or they're friends and I want to help out. But I enjoy the process of filmmaking. I love pre-production. Production is just so much fun. I like being on set, and if the person needs me to be there with a camera, well, I've got my camera. There's just limitations of the battery. But yeah, I don't mind being. I enjoy being on sets. It's kind of nice to be on other people's sets and see how they run, and then I get to learn from that and improve myself for my next film.
Well, Ethan, I want to take this chance to again thank you for being willing to actually shoot with me about this in the morning. I know we're used to doing this in the middle of the night, so honestly, thank you for taking a good chunk of your Sunday to actually just humor me on doing this interview. Thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for. I always enjoy talking with you, Ryan.